I just got back from holiday to meet this arriving in the post. It's a travel router. I know what you're thinking. Wouldn't that have made more sense to have arrived before my holiday? Well, yes. It works out well for you though, because now I can give you my thoughts about whether you actually need one of these devices, having just been traveling without one. TLDR, no, you don't need a travel router. I mean, I went on holiday without one and I didn't die, but I did encounter a few irritations where having a device like this could have improved my experience. I'll tell you what those were so you can ponder it for yourself. Then I'll review this specific model, the GL.iNet Slate 7, covering its use as a travel router, as well as some slightly more creative ways to make use of the hardware. Let's start with my holiday. My family and I rented a small property. It came with Wi-Fi. To be honest, I can't remember the last time I went somewhere that didn't. Our host sent us the Wi-Fi password in advance via email. I had the forethought to save it to my phone, because it occurred to me that if the only place it was documented was that email, then I could be in the position of needing to get on the internet to retrieve the password to get on the internet. It turns out that was exactly the case. The rest of my family had a different yet equally effective plan. Give your devices to Dad and let him sort it out. Potential travel router improvement number 1. If the router was configured to broadcast the same Wi-Fi network as we have at home, everyone's devices would have automatically connected to the router, and the only thing I would have had to connect is the router itself. Now the place actually had a really good internet connection, although you wouldn't know it. With my phone right next to the router, I was getting 550 megabits per second down and 300 up. That's faster than my internet here. But if I went more than a single room away, or I dared to go upstairs at all, there was no connection. Our hosts had clearly invested in a good internet connection, but had no idea how to set up a wireless network. Their router may as well have been encased in concrete the way it was positioned, and it must have been set to the minimum transmission power. I live in the UK where houses tend to be built with solid walls as well, so I know that a single correctly positioned router should have been sufficient for that entire property to get at least 100 megabits in every room. If you want a gigabit everywhere, you need to add more than one access point, but I'd have settled with being able to look up a local restaurant or read my emails. Potential travel router improvement number 2 then, I could have used this to extend the existing network to provide coverage where I needed it by placing it somewhere not stupid. I realise we're talking first world problems here, but this is a mobile phone. Keyword, mobile. If I have to get out of bed and walk downstairs to the room with internet in order to use it, it's not living up to the name. The last way in which a travel router could have benefited me is security. The internet is a bad place full of bad people trying to do bad things to you. Your home router basically creates its own little bubble protected by a firewall. Because of that firewall, nobody can connect into your bubble unless you do something to let them in. When you join a Wi-Fi network somewhere else, you're connecting to someone else's bubble, and you don't really know how safe that bubble is. The people who owned our temporary home might have been creeps who were recording our internet traffic. I don't live there, and I have the Wi-Fi password. Who's to say who else knows it and may casually decide to join the bubble with us? Connecting a travel router to their network and connecting your devices to the travel router essentially creates a bubble within a bubble, protecting you from anything nasty on their network. If the travel router comes loaded with a VPN, you can tunnel your internet traffic out over the VPN so nobody is able to spy on you locally. I'm generally not a fan of what I see as a predatory VPN market full of snake oil salesmen, which is why I don't advertise them on this channel. But this is one of the genuine use cases where a VPN actually does provide a benefit. So those are the benefits of a travel router as I see it. Convenience, performance, and security. No, you don't need one, but they do serve a useful purpose. Now let's take a look at the Slate 7 specifically. The reason this arrived after my holiday is because I didn't buy it for my holiday. It was just coincidental timing that GL.iNet happened to send one to me around the same time. This video is not sponsored. I didn't buy this, but I haven't been paid either. The reason it's called a Slate 7 is because it supports the latest Wi-Fi 7 standard, as indicated on its little bunny ear antenna. It operates in both the 2.4 and 5 GHz frequency ranges and can combine them using MLO. It does not support the 6 GHz range. Some Wi-Fi 7 devices do, some don't. This doesn't. And that's probably a good call for a travel router, seeing as the 6 GHz range is restricted in some regions. According to the spec sheet, it supports up to 688 megabits per second at 2.4 GHz, as well as 2882 megabits per second at 5 GHz. These are Wi-Fi numbers though, and Wi-Fi speed measurements made in a carefully controlled and electromagnetically shielded lab rarely resemble real-world use at all. Now, I don't have an AM lab to test this in, but to give you an indication, I set a Wi-Fi 7 antenna directly on top of the router, connected to its Wi-Fi network, and ran an iPerf speed test to another device plugged into its LAN port. This was in a fairly noisy environment on the same desk as 3 monitors, 2 computers, a set of speakers, and a couple of phones with several other wireless access points nearby. The Slate 7 clocked in at just under 2 gigabits a second. Obviously, most people are not going to use their wireless devices literally touching the router in the real world, so your mileage will vary. This is basically an ideal test in a less than ideal environment, but it shows that in the right circumstances, this little device can hit decent speeds. Looking around the back of the device, it has a USB-A port, a USB-C port, and 2 Ethernet ports. The Ethernet ports are both 2.5 gigabit, so based on that test, they shouldn't be a bottleneck. One is labelled WAN and the other LAN. They are remappable though, so if you're using this router to connect an upstream wireless network and don't need the physical WAN port, you can change it to behave as a second LAN port and plug in another device instead. Conversely, if all of your devices are wireless, and you have for some reason decided to holiday in a server room, you can remap the LAN port to be a second WAN port and have redundant internet connections. The USB-C port is for power. The power adapter comes with North American prongs that fold down to attach a variety of alternative plugs. It comes with one for the continental Europeans, one for our Aussie and Kiwi friends, and of course the king of plugs, the BS1363 Type G UK plug. Don't argue with me on this, Google it. It seems sensible that a travel router would come with swappable plugs. Although because it's powered by USB PD, you can also power it using a phone charger, a USB power bank, or even just a USB port on your laptop. The USB-A port pulls double duty. You can attach USB storage and use the router as a file or media server if you can't face travelling without your movie collection. Or you can plug in a 5G dongle or a mobile phone and share the connection amongst your devices via the router. A 5G dongle in here and a USB power bank in here, and you've got Wi-Fi on the beach. Until it gets wrecked by sand and water. The front of the device is a handy touchscreen. You don't really want to spend your holiday configuring a network. Well, maybe some of you do, but you're weird. The idea is you can do most of the setup in advance, and then just finger mash a few buttons on the touchscreen so you don't have to open a laptop. You can view stats, connect to a network, display your Wi-Fi connection details, and toggle features like VPNs, ad blocking, and parental controls off and on using a touchscreen. You can also put a pin lock on it to prevent your kids activating adult mode. Finally, on the side you'll find a push button and a toggle switch. The button is for resetting the device. A few seconds resets it back to normal operation if you manage to lock yourself out by switching it into the wrong mode, and holding it for longer will do a full factory reset. The toggle switch is mappable. You can set it to do different things like switching the VPN or ad blocking on and off. In terms of configuration options aside from the touchscreen, the Slate 7 has a web interface and a mobile app. There's also a command line interface, but we'll get to that later. The mobile app covers most of the standard options you're going to need to get yourself up and running and connected to the internet using one of the available options. Those are joining a Wi-Fi network, plugging in an Ethernet cable, tethering to a phone, or using a 5G dongle. You can also set up your VPNs, ad blocking, parental controls, and media sharing from the app. The app's pretty decent in terms of functionality, but if I'm being critical, and I am, one thing that ended up frustrating me no end was that if you're on the first level of any of these tabs, the back button closes the app instead of taking you back to the home screen. It's particularly annoying because some of the buttons on the home screen take you to part of another tab, which still counts as the first level, whereas other buttons are taking you a second level deep. So the user experience is that you can tap a button on the home screen, arrive at another screen, and then depending on which button you tapped, your back button may now take you back to the home screen, or it may exit the app entirely. I know it's a relatively minor thing, but with a number of times I ended up accidentally exiting the app, I think this needs fixing, because it really detracts from an otherwise fairly slick experience. If you log into the web interface, you have a few more options available to you. There's a lot more here than you'd likely expect from the travel router description, and that, my friends, is called foreshadowing. The cloud section could be of interest if you were considering this for business use. Good Cloud is GL.iNet's centralized management tool. It appears to be free for personal use, although I'm not really sure why you'd need it. Presumably, you'd be traveling with your travel router. For business use though, I can absolutely see a benefit here to support people on the road. If you work in IT, you know what I mean. If you don't, then allow me to explain. When I worked in the service desk, I once received a broken laptop from an end user. He claimed the laptop stopped working when he tried to connect to the hotel Wi-Fi. But the evidence in front of me suggested there was more to the story, so I asked for a more detailed account. His hotel had a Wi-Fi cable, and this individual knew that Wi-Fi cables are better than wireless Wi-Fi, so he used the cable. Now, terminology aside, he's not wrong. Everything else being equal, an Ethernet cable will give you a more reliable connection. The thing is, his laptop didn't have an Ethernet port. This was merely an inconvenience, however. He made his own. He went down to the hotel kitchen, borrowed a bread knife, and proceeded to hack a hole into the side of his laptop, through which he inserted his Wi-Fi cable. These people exist. They're out there with our data on public Wi-Fi. Giving them a pre-configured and remotely manageable device that connects automatically to whatever it is you want these people to connect to probably has some use cases, but I haven't tested it for this video. As a general conclusion, and back button misbehavior aside, I found the mobile app and web interface to be functional and reasonably intuitive, provided you're using this as a travel router. The inclusion of multiple VPN services, AdGuard, parental controls seems like a sensible choice. If you're the sort of person running this stuff in your network at home, you would presumably like to maintain the same protection when you're away from home, and GL.iNet has positioned this router as a solution to that. If you want to use it as something other than a travel router, you definitely can, but it's somewhat less intuitive as the user interface seems to be geared more towards that bubble within a bubble notion. For example, if you want to use it as a Wi-Fi repeater to extend the reach of your network at home, you can. But if you use the repeater option in the app, it's going to create a protected network bubble. In real terms, your extended network is going to be in a different subnet with an additional layer of NAT between you and the rest of your home network. If you've connected it to an untrusted public Wi-Fi network, that's exactly what you want. But it's not what you'd want at home, and it's not what I expected from a Wi-Fi repeater. The NAT settings provide no way to disable this double NATing. What you actually want to do in this case is leave the app, come into the web interface, ignore the NAT settings, and change the network mode from router to extender. That disables NAT between the wireless and LAN interfaces and makes it behave more like a switch. If you want to use it as a wireless client bridge to hook a device with an Ethernet port up to a wireless network, you can do that. This, by the way, is something I'm probably going to use it for a lot, because I regularly find myself testing out strange combinations of hardware that may have no native wireless capability, and I end up with cables strewn everywhere. It's a perfect use case for this to connect random devices to Wi-Fi without them needing adapters or drivers, and I don't even need a power socket because it'll run off a USB port. So the router can do this, but there is no bridge mode. You either enable repeater mode, then enable extender mode to disable NAT and plug into the LAN port, or you enable repeater mode, but leave it on router mode and plug into the WAN port because it now considers your regular Wi-Fi to be the WAN. It is all possible, the options are there, they might just not be where you expected them to be. Speaking of altering its behavior, allow me to introduce you to the plugins page. Here, things get interesting. When I checked this at first, I was expecting maybe a couple more pre-baked VPNs, another DNS filtering integration, something like that. Nothing drastically different to what we've already seen. I was wrong. There is over 1,000 pages of plugins. Not thousands of plugins, thousands of pages of plugins. What is going on here? Surely they didn't build thousands upon thousands of plugins just for a travel router? What's going on here is that under the covers, the Slate 7 runs OpenWRT. It's a free Linux-based operating system for routers, and people have built thousands of software packages for OpenWRT. GL.iNet hasn't developed their own operating system. They haven't reinvented the wheel. They've packaged OpenWRT with their hardware and wrapped it in a custom user experience. I particularly like that they're not hiding this. There are lots of companies that take open source software, slap some lipstick on, and resell it as if they built it themselves from scratch. GL.iNet isn't doing this. If you come down to System, then Advanced Settings, this button takes you into the vanilla OpenWRT web interface. If you prefer, you can SSH into it as well. I approve of this. I have an old router in a cupboard somewhere that I flashed with custom firmware years ago. It wasn't OpenWRT, it was DDWRT, but same idea. There are communities of people who take off-the-shelf devices and figure out ways to hack them to run custom firmware like OpenWRT. For me, it gave my old router a new lease of life, with support for features like VLAN tagging that doesn't normally exist on that class of consumer hardware. There is a risk from doing this though. It's not supported, and if your hardware is a slightly different revision than the one the firmware was built for, there is a risk you might brick it. Some vendors deliberately make it as difficult as possible because they don't want you getting more features without paying for them. GL.iNet is embracing it. If you want a nice, curated, tested and supported experience, stick with what they've shipped. If you want to take matters into your own hands and customize the crap out of your device, crack on, click here. Don't blame them if you break it, but it's your device, so do what you want with it. In terms of what you can do, well, it's not so much a case of what you can do as more of what you should do. You can install anything you find here, but that doesn't mean it's going to work particularly well. Bear in mind the constraints of the hardware. It has a quad-core Qualcomm ARM processor with 1GB of RAM and half a gig of storage, roughly half of which is going to be consumed by the pre-installed software. You can do some mad stuff. Like, there are thousands of packages here, but one of them is Docker. So you can install Docker on your router, and now you have access to millions of containerized applications. Theoretically, you could deploy an Elasticsearch cluster on your router. I mean, I say theoretically because it won't stop you from trying, but it's not going to end well. The OpenWRT packages are usually pretty small and geared towards embedded device scenarios like this, so you can install plenty of those. The fact it can run Docker is interesting though. If you're going to do that, you'll need to keep an eye on resource use, and you'll almost certainly need to mount a USB drive to give you enough storage. But if you want to run Jellyfin directly in your travel router, you can do that. I'm not going to say it'll be easy or that'll be the most responsive experience, but you can do it. In terms of value, that's a little trickier to judge because it's going to depend on your circumstances. Price-wise, it retails for £138 or $150 US. It's not the cheapest Wi-Fi 7 router, it's not the most expensive. It is probably one of the smallest. Price does not equal value, however. You could use this as your home router, but its diminutive size makes it better suited to packing in a suitcase than connecting lots of devices. With that in mind, you're really looking at this as a secondary device for travelling, and the value you're able to extract from it will depend on how often you travel and how many people you travel with. If you go on holiday by yourself once every couple of years and leave it on a shelf for the rest of the time, it's not worth it. If, however, you travel regularly, especially with a group of people, then you'll get a lot of benefit from it. For me, personally, I don't travel enough these days with others that I'd buy a dedicated travel router if that's all it could do. But especially with the inclusion of OpenWRT, I view this more as a networking Swiss Army knife than just a travel router. I regularly need to hook up random devices to a network, or segregate things, or concoct unusual network topologies to test stuff. So for me, this is probably worth it just for that. And the fact that I can use it on holiday is a bonus. I think GL.iNet has done a good job of taking OpenWRT and turning it into something that's both functional and reasonably intuitive for its intended use. Whether it's worth it to you, you'll need to decide for yourself. If you are interested in grabbing one, I'll put affiliate links in the video description for you. Feel free to ask questions in the comments if you think I've missed something, or let me know if you're using OpenWRT to do anything crazy with one of these things. I'm sure one of you has already tried to run the world's smallest data center on it. You guys never let me down. Neither does YouTube with its ability to recommend a good video to watch. You see what I did there? See, I was talking about this video, but it's actually for you to watch because YouTube thinks you'll like it.